Well, hello everyone. I'm Bart Lardner, a professor in the Department of Animal and Poultry Science here at the University of Saskatchewan. And tonight I want to talk about extensive backgrounding systems for beef calves. Our program is all about applied beef and forage research. And so how do we put forages in front of that gestating beef cow throughout the calendar year? How do we calve her? How do we breed her? But the other part of what we look at is certainly the management of that wean calf and some of the background alternatives that are out there for cow-calf producers. I'm quite active on social media, so feel free to follow me on Twitter at Dr. Bart Beef. For over 25 years, our program has functioned out of the Termunda Research Ranch at Lanigan, Saskatchewan. Organization known as Western Beef Development Center. In 2018, we started the transition over to the Livestock Forage Center of Excellence here at Clavet, Saskatchewan. So outside of an hour and a half east of Saskatoon, we're now only 20 minutes just south of Saskatoon, south of Clavet, Saskatchewan. So great opportunity here for the beef industry in this province. I need to start off and talk a little bit about some work my colleague Kathy Larson has done with the Western Canadian Cow-Calf Survey and some of the results and responses of producers. And so how do they manage their herds over the winter time, and how do they look at feeding that beef cow or possibly backgrounding that calf? And of all the respondents in that survey showed that there was a high percent in this province, 67%, who utilize some type of extensive system. So be it swath graze, bale graze, stockpile, maybe looking at alternative crops like corn or possibly grazing residues. So a lot of folks are looking at these alternative systems, moving the animal outside of that dry lot or that confined system. We know that feed really is the single greatest variable cost in beef production, and so no difference when we're looking at trying to build that basal diet for that backgrounding calf, that wean calf, that 5-weight animal, moving it on to a high fibrous, slow gain type program over the next 100, 150 days prior to going into a feedlot finishing program. We've done a lot of extensive backgrounding research at Western Beef, now Livestock Forage Center of Excellence, and so I'll share some of those findings with you tonight. What is the goal when we're looking at extensive backgrounding? Really, it's trying to reduce the cost of gain from harvested forages. So it could be stockpile, it could be annuals, it could be perennials, but at the same time, putting adequate forage in front of that calf for that targeted gain to put on those pounds to that final body weight, and is it maintaining the targeted gain given the cold stress that the calf is out there, and some things we need to think about. The other value is that we're really capturing those manure nutrients because we have these animals out in that extensive area that may be nutrient deficient on your farm or your ranch, and taking advantage of deposition of manure nutrients. So as I already said, yeah, some of the options that are out there are looking at stockpile perennials, possibly bale grazing, possibly utilizing some of these annual cool or warm season crops in that backgrounding program. But remember that the goal of the nutrition program, of that feeding program, is to make sure there's adequate energy, protein density in those forages, possibly supplements to meet that targeted performance level. And so it's quite prudent, it's extremely important that you go out and feed test. What do we need to think about when that calf is outside of that dry lot or that confined system? Is protection from those cold winds, those winter winds, getting into that, early December, January, February time period. You need to have adequate wind protection out there, either portable windbreaks or possibly natural shelter belts. The other great tool is fencing. We've used a lot of options over the years at Western Beef. So either a high tensile perimeter fence with these polyelectric fencing. Just we're using that tool to control forage utilization and wastage. Plus, what are you going to use for your winter watering system? So is there existing wet well? We've also looked at insulated troughs, portable troughs, or there's always these other options, frost-free nose pumps. And so think about you're going to have these calves in these extensive systems. What's the water point? What's the water source? Is it installed? Is there one existing? Can you pull off that dugout with a wet well system? Certainly they're going to need that water source when they're out there. So in a nutshell, when you've extensive grazed or background of your calves, this is what you want to see: the field post grazing, deposition of manure nutrients. A nice layer of manure here in this particular picture. This is not what you want to see. And so quite a few years ago, we were looking at an alternative grazing program for backgrounding calves, looking at trying to graze fall rye. And in this case, we had 2 freezing rains and then a blizzard. And so it just made that feed non-palatable. There was a huge challenge for prehension of the feed. The calves, after about 2 weeks, were starting to go backwards. Kind of asked them to consume frozen celery, if you like. And so you always have to have plan B. And what was plan B in this case? Bringing them back to the yard and feeding them in dry lot. We did come out the following spring, however, and we did utilize this windrow crop in the field. I need to also state, and I've done this many times over the years, is that when cattle are out on an extensive program or a field or a pasture somewhere, they are depositing manure nutrients. And so there's an awful lot of nitrogen and phosphorus coming through the fecal material, coming from the urine and being left out there. And that's a good thing. You're just enhancing the cycling process. And so some work that we did, we just fed 64 cows out in an extensive program for 110 days. And even if some of that N didn't stick around, about 30% volatilized or leached off, there was approximately 100 acres of 100 pounds of N per acre, out there after that extensive grazing program. This is what you're looking at, because you have those calves out in that field. Maybe there's some, perennial or annual forage that you're grazing, but it's all about capturing the litter and enhancing the soil characteristics, the organic matter, all those types of things, because you're feeding on that field over consecutive years. There's lots of challenges in extensive backgrounding with these calves. Acclimation, okay, they have to figure it out. We get some naive calves. They don't know where to go for the feed. So can they find the windrow? Are they used to consuming whole plant corn? Are they coming for that supplemental pellet or maybe that supplemental protein, something like that? This is just a picture of some of the work we did at Western Beef at Lanigan, and you can see on the left was the calves going out to the field, and then a short 5 weeks later, the calves coming home. So snow depth did challenge us in this particular program, but you have to be ready if you're going to go down this road and think about having these calves out there. Utilization, are they out there? Are they cleaning up that basal forage, that crop that you're asking them to graze? In this case, you can see it's corn. And what's your comfort level? What are your utilization level? Where do you want your animals to fit in? Look at all these challenges, right? The wind chill factor, snow depth, how deep can the snow be? And of course, the fluctuating temperature. We talked about cold stress and minus 25, minus 30 with a 15-click wind. What about when it warms up and these calves back off? And so you need to be flexible and ready to adjust to that day-to-day. We've always suggested 3 to 4 days allocation of fresh grazing, fresh forage. A lot of folks go a little bit longer, maybe a week's worth of grazing, or maybe 10 days, so every producer has their own options at how much fresh forage you're going to allocate to these calves. So as I said, dry lot backgrounding is very common in Western Canada, but we know that there is that increased cost to gain, the cost of the facilities, paid unpaid labor, all these things. And so just to go back, what does that growing calf need? Say a 550 weight calf, newly weaned, needing about 11.4 crude protein and about 63.5 TDN or energy to achieve, say, a targeted 2 pounds a day, roughly about 16 pounds of dry matter per day that calf should be consuming. So just some numbers to look at. Make sure you go back, find out what NRC is depending on the start weight of your calves. Is it 550? Is it 650 weights? Do you want to get to 850? Where do you want to end your backgrounding program? And what is your targeted gain? It may not be 2 pounds. It may be 1.8. It might be 2.2. I don't know. But there's options out there. We have the cool seasons, the barleys, the oats. We have the warm seasons, the corns, the millets. And so what is the type of extensive program we want to see happening? Just want to talk a little bit now about some of the work we've done. And one of the studies we did was looking at asking these calves to go out and swath graze. So we looked at a warm season and a cool season. So our warm season, as you can see here, is golden German millet. And our cool season was just a Ranger barley, a smooth-on barley. We windrowed these, we swathed them. And then our third system was just that backgrounding in that dry lot or that confined system. And so a 3-year study, and we like to do studies over consecutive years to look at the effective environment, and we just have more confidence in our findings. So in this case, we allocated field forage every 3 days, and you know that the basal forage just does not give enough for these calves to gain. So we have to bring in that extra energy protein because of the wind chill factor, because of the cold stress out there in the field. The other thing is that our backgrounding calves are in the pen, and the dry lot came down with some coccidiosis, and so we had to administer an ionophore, and to do that through the pelleted supplement. So hence everybody had to get the same supplement. But you may think about a little extra energy protein if you're asking these calves to go out there and maybe swath graze. We followed these calves over 3 years through the backgrounding phase, and then we also want to look at the impact of the backgrounding program on their feedlot finishing performance. And so they all then went from the field to the university feedlot here in Saskatoon and put them on that silage, that wet-based diet, okay, and then finally moved them into a 20-80% roughage concentrate all the way to finish to 12 millimeter back fat, and looked at obviously the performance in the feedlot and the carcass characteristics. So looking at the effect of the backgrounding system on feedlot finishing. So this is the backgrounding performance of these calves, and here you can see that the barley swath grazed calves is the first row, the millet swath grazed calves the middle, and then finally our confined dry lot calves. And what was interesting is that our barley swath grazed and our dry lot gained similar on average over 3 years. And so we were kind of puzzled, so we went back and looked at some things, and really what was happening with the barley swath graze versus the millet swath graze is the barley swath graze go out there and sort the plant structures. And so the calves, as you know, are quite selective, and they're able to sort off those barley heads, and then also get that supplemental intake as well, compared to the millet calves couldn't sort off. They had to consume that whole millet plant. And the other issue is the millet swath was higher moisture. And so basically the barley swath raised calves energy protein intake was greater density than the millet, and so henceforth it was reflected in their performance. How did they work or perform in the feedlot? Feedlot performance of these calves, so we found at the end of the day no difference in final body weight, some compensatory gain in these millet swath grazed calves, but no negative effect of the backgrounding program on final body weight of these calves, including the start end or the end weights, and then finally the average daily gain. What about costs? And so certainly our beef economist is a key part of these research projects, and so calculating all of those costs you see there. But just to summarize, looking at our cost to gain, our barley swath graze in the field had lower cost to gain compared to our dry lot. And to summarize, then cost to gain to background calves on those barley swaths in the field was 41 and 43% less compared to the millet swath grazed calves in the field or the dry lot pens. And so, yeah, something to think about. What is the crop you want them to go out there and consume? There's that adaptation period I talked about, get them settled after weaning. And so that's where they have to go out and consume that forage. Are they adapted? How's the weather? Does it warm up? Does it get really cold? So these are all things to look at. Some other work we did was looking at, is there another option out there? So this was a bale graze system. We were trying to background calves a 2-year study with my grad student, and let's bring in an alternate type of energy protein sup. And so the co-product of the ethanol industry, or DDGS, in this case it was wheat, DDGS. And so what we did is we just had bale grazed calves out there, and we looked at, okay, let's formulate that diet based on 100% barley grain. So this was rolled processed barley grain as the energy sup, along with that bale graze forage. It was basically a mixed grass, legume, round bale hay. And then we just went 100% barley grain or 100% dry distillers grains, or a 50-50 blend. And really interesting is that they really did like the DDGS, very palatable. This is how they performed, you see. So the start and end weights here. And of course, this is the positive body weight change. And at the end of the day, we saw a little bit greater performance of those calves receiving that 100% DDGS compared to the barley, and even a little bit slighter, greater gain on those 50-50 calves. So we can take that wet distillers or dry distillers and put it into a lab, and we'll get a wet chemistry value. But I think the value is in what's the energy coming from. In this case, it's coming from digestible fiber and fat. From the barley, it's coming from starch. And we know that starch has a negative associative effect on fiber digestion. And so that's possibly explaining why our DDGS calves gain a little bit better in our 50-50 compared to the barley grain supplemented calves. I just want to finish up, talk about corn. We've done a lot of work with grazing corn at Western Beef, now Livestock Forage Center of Excellence. And if you're going to grow corn, you have to do some homework. You have to do some agronomy, figure out your heat units, find that variety that's adapted to your heat unit area wherever you live. You farm or you ranch, and so there's lots of good information online from your local's ministry office as well. This is some of the websites that I look at for heat units. I use this bottom one here, farmzone.com, and it'll give you historical data wherever you live. But there's also some really good information on the provincial websites as well. In a nutshell, to grow corn, I'm certainly learned a lot from my agronomy colleagues over the years. Make sure that it's a warm seed bed, don't seed too early. Suggested rate is about 30,000 seeds per acre. Soil temperature should be warm, seed at 1.5 inches. Row spacing, corn planters are best versus air seeders. Do a good soil test for a good fertility program. Corn likes lots of nitrogen. We've done the work on air drills versus corn planters and found out that you're probably losing about 10-15% biomass with the air drill. And also you need to address the weed pressure. And so probably if it's a Roundup type, a couple of shots to suppress those weeds at 4 and 8 leaf stage of glyphosate. Just kind of has a nice clean field that you see here in this background picture. It's not very competitive with weeds until it gets about knee-high and higher. Where does it fit in a grazing system? Corn actually is very nutrient dense. It actually exceeds gestating beef cows' requirements. But for these growing calves, these backgrounding calves, we probably have to think again about that supplement that should be going out there. Stage maturity suggestion is it be at half milk line at the first killing frost. For us, it was September 15th at Lanigan. So it's about that half milk line. In my mind, you've got about 50% fiber and 50% starch per acre. And so you need to mitigate the level of starch intake with fiber intake. Where is the nutrients coming from in the corn plant? Well, certainly in the cob, in the starch, in the grain. You can see that here's, most of the dry matter. There's the fiber, and certainly be aware of that compared to, when they're out in that field and they're sourcing you're giving them maybe a week or maybe 10 days of fresh corn for grazing, they're going to go out and figure out to choose those cobs first. So that's where we're moving that electric fence every 3 to 4 days. We're trying to limit graze. We're asking them, yeah, they're going to go and pick cobs the first day, but second day, third day, they're going to have to go back, graze the husk, the fiber, the stalk, just to get that fiber in the diet. And even calves will source off those cobs first. And so they don't clean up as well as a mature cow, so you need to be aware of that. And we've done some work looking at 3 versus 9 day allocation of fresh forage with or without a fiber, and so strongly suggesting to have that old hay or that round bale out there as a fiber source if you're going to be looking at this type of a program. Make sure that they're aware that that's the that's the crop that they have to graze. It's quite daunting for calves to go up there and try and utilize standing whole plant corn. And also, I can't say enough about a good mineral program. So make sure you've got a good mineral package in front of these calves when they're out there. They're going to get quite a bit of phosphorus from that corn, so make sure that cal-phos ratio is in that mineral sup 2 to 1 or greater. So just to talk a little bit about some of our results, we're grazing backgrounding calves with corn, whole plant corn. We had to consider intake, were they getting an nutrient-dense diet? Did we swath it? We've done that in the past. It's one more cost. Did we ask them to graze it standing? What's your targeted gain? In our case, it was 1.8 or whatever weather would allow. It was again a 3-year study. Okay, our 3 systems were whole plant corn compared to swath barley, compared to those confined or dry lot backgrounded calves back in the pen. Once they came out of the backgrounding program, we then moved them to the feedlot finishing program, and so the difference in the feedlot diet was either a corn grain-based diet or a barley grain-based diet. Here's our nutritive value of the forages. You can see that certainly the barley, pretty good protein, okay, and pretty good energy. Maybe a little bit less than what we suggested for that 5-weight calf. I think it was 63, 64. Corn tends to be a little low on protein, so certainly you have to think about a protein sup, and of course those dry lot calves are getting a processed barley green feed. They perform, and here you can see their start weights, their end weights, and that's their average daily gain. So, slightly less, but similar to how our dry lot calves gained. It was very cold those 3 years that we did this study. But, it certainly was an alternative for producers to think about, can they look at weaning their calves, putting them out and getting them used to grazing corn in an extensive grazing program. How did they finish in the feed? Again, no difference in terms of final body weights, and certainly targeted gains were there in the feedlot phase as well. So no negative effect of the backgrounding system on feedlot performance. So in fact, you look at the cost of gain here, that the background calves on barley swaths and whole plant was 50 or 53% less than the dry lot system, just because of the overhead and the facility costs with that confined system compared to the extensive backgrounding program. Just to finish up, this is just a slide showing you all the work we've done on extensive grazing programs, the percent lower compared to dry lot, ranging from 8 to 30%. There's all your alternatives, right? Swath graze, bale graze, residue grazing, standing corn. So that's all on our website, westernbeef.org. So yeah, extensive grazing, your objective is to capture the manure nutrients, start small. If you don't feel comfortable, you have to get used to it. The calves have to get used to it. So start small and then expand as you gain experience. And maybe consider a fiber source if you're going to go down the road with the corn. We're just looking at some new research myself and my colleague, Dr. Greg Penner, just using that corn, different structures of the corn, i.e. snaplage or high moisture in extensive grazing systems. So I'll end there, and hopefully we'll have further conversation, but thank you very much for your time.